Hey everybody, my name is Ray. This is Tamimi. He's the Jordanian Canadian on the DevRel team here at Qlik, and you're watching Qlik Branch.
Let's do some coding.
So now that we have an engine up and running, what we're going to want to do is load data into a Qlik app so that we can pull it out later. To do that, we're going to use two open source libraries that exist in the Qlik open source ecosystem. The first one is called Enigma.js, and this is a JavaScript library that we've created to allow people to easily connect to the Qlik engine, because the engine itself is a WebSocket API. Which is great because it allows a robust amount of languages to be able to actually connect to it, but WebSocket connection isn't always easy, and WebSocket communication isn't always easy either. So we developed a JavaScript library to make this easier for web developers to use. So Enigma.js is the first library we're going to use. The second one we're going to use is called Halyard.js. And Halyard.js is another open source library that we've created to actually allow you to generate the load scripts and load in data easily through JavaScript. So to get this started, what we're going to do is we're going to create a directory that we're going to do all of this in. I'm going to call it data load. I'm going to do an npm init. And the reason why I'm doing npm init is because I want a package.json file sitting in that directory so that when I do my install of the libraries that I need, I can hold on to them for later. So I'll do an npm install, and I'm going to install WS, which is a WebSocket library available on npm. I'm going to install Enigma.js, and I'm going to install Halyard.js. So Enigma.js and Halyard.js are both available in the npm ecosystem. So now if I check my package.json, I can see I have all of those in there, and I can immediately start coding. So I'm going to create an index.js file here in my data load, and I will import everything that I need here. So I'll import the WebSocket library. And then I'm going to import the Enigma library. The next thing I'm going to need is I'm going to need the schema out of the Enigma library. So I'm going to do this /schema/ and I'm going to use the latest schema, which is 12.270.2. And let me just confirm to make sure that's right. Yes. So 12.270.2. Next I'm going to want my Halyard, and because this is a constructor, I'm going to give it a capital H. And the last thing that I'm going to want from Halyard is a mixin. And if you don't know what a mixin is, a mixin allows Halyard to interlace essentially with Enigma, and it gives Enigma a couple of more functions that use Halyard in order to quickly and easily create an app. You'll see what I'm talking about later. So from the Halyard library, we are going to import the Halyard Enigma mixin. Cool. So now that we have all of our imports, we're going to just create a function that we'll be able to run. And the reason why I'm creating a function instead of just writing the code out specifically is because the Enigma.js library is asynchronous, and you can't just make async await calls in the base of a Node.js script. So I actually have to create a function for it and then call it down at the end. And since we're using async and await, I'm going to create a kind of a try-catch around everything, because the way that async await works is that it will throw an error if there's any problems, and we just want to catch everything at the beginning. Issue with data load. I'm never good at deciding what to say at the beginning of my console errors. So. All right, so now that we have our try-catch, the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to need some data. So I'm going to create a data folder, and from that data folder, I'm going to add two CSV files that I have, and I'm just going to drag them over here. So they should be in there now. Yep, perfect. These should be available in the repository for the video series. we could take a quick look and see. So what we're dealing with is we have two files. One is a list of a file of movies. And there's different fields, so colors, whether or not it's a color or black and white movie, the director name, a bunch of numerical data. There's some URLs in there too. And then the second file that we have is poster data. So the original data set, movies.csv, doesn't have any poster information in it. So we've got a second file that has the movie title and then the poster URL inside of it. So once we have that, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to load in that data. So we'll say movie data equals, one more import. Turns out that we need is FS. And what FS is, if you're not used to node.js, FS is the file system library that exists in node.js. It allows us to do things like read in files, write out files, that kind of stuff. So we've got movie data equals fs.readFileSync. And because I'm in an async and await, I could do, I could just do read file and pass in the path, which will be data / movies.csv, and put await in front of that. And we also want to load in our poster data. Read file / posters.csv. So now that we have our data available, we want to start using Halyard and getting this data into a format that Halyard and Enigma will be able to understand. So we're going to need a new Halyard object. And with that Halyard object, what we're going to do is we're going to add the tables in there. So we will convert those data variables into actual Halyard tables. So we could say movie table equals Halyard.table, and we pass in the movie data. And do the same thing with here. We do poster table equals, and this is actually a constructor, so we have to pass in a new Halyard.table poster data. So we have our new tables, and we can add them into Halyard just by doing Halyard.addTable, movie table, and Halyard.addTable, poster table. And so one of the cool features about Halyard.js is that we don't actually have to specify what the data is for things like CSV data. The library itself is fairly intuitive at determining what certain types of data sets are. So by just passing in raw CSV, Halyard.js is going to recognize that this is CSV data, and it's going to parse the data into different fields automatically. Now that we've done that, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to create a session to our engine, open up that session, and run a mixin function to take the Halyard object, take the data that we've given in the Halyard object, and create a Qlik app with it. So we'll start by creating a session. So we do enigma.create. And there's different properties that we pass in here. We're going to need to pass in the schema. We're going to need to pass in the mixins. And this is a JavaScript object, but you notice I'm only passing in one thing here. That's because there's a shortcut in JavaScript that says if you have a variable name that's the same as a property you're trying to give an object, you can simply just pass in the variable name, and the JavaScript will parse it out. I need to give a URL to an engine, and this is the engine that we stood up in the last tutorial, which is at our local host at 19076. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to pass in a create socket function. And this is a function that Enigma.js is going to take is going to use when opening up the connection. So that's why we actually imported the WebSocket library before. So what we're saying here is this create socket function is going to return a new WebSocket based on the URL that's passed in. So this is how we create a session in Enigma.js. We have to pass in the schema of the engine that we're connecting to, any mixins that we might want, where we're actually connecting to, and how we're creating the socket in order to connect to the engine. So once we have our session, we can actually do session.open, and this is an await as well. And the variable that we get back when we do a session.open is a global object variable for the Qlik engine. And this global object variable is what allows us to create apps, open apps, get a list of apps, do any of the more global stuff that's available in the engine. What we will be able to do here is, because we passed in the Halyard mixin up above, we're actually going to be able to just say await kicks.create app using Halyard. And the mixin has plugged that into the global object. We need to give a name to our app, so we'll call it movies, and we'll pass in our Halyard object, which has all of the data in. And this function will go off to the engine and actually create this app and load the data into the app, basically in one step for us. Once we've done that, we can actually just do a session.close and close the engine off. We can hit save. And if everything has gone right, we can actually, let's just add a console log into the bottom of this. That way we know that we've reached the end of our try catch, our successful try. And when we run, we see cannot find module Enigma.js and schemas. All right. If we take a look in our node modules, Enigma.js, schemas, I've got 12.170. Oh, so I got that wrong. So let's go with 12.170.2. Apparently me verifying it before did absolutely nothing. Let's run that again, and callback must be a function. Okay, so apparently the read file is not actually an async that returns a promise. So what we can do is we'll just do this, and we'll do a read file sync. Sync is, you can add sync onto almost any of these asynchronous functions in the Node.js FS and run it synchronously. Connection.get kicks connection object. We're running into a whole lot of trouble, aren't we? All right, so there was probably a cut that you just saw there, and the reason why is because I was troubleshooting what the problem was with my script, why things weren't loading up, and I found the problem. It's kind of a dumb coding thing. It has nothing to do with the engine itself. Let me show you what I did wrong. So read file sync actually doesn't return a string of the data. It returns a buffer, and the Halyard.js didn't appreciate that very much. So what I had to do is I actually had to do .toString on either of these, on both of these, and that'll return actual CSV data into those variables. So now that I've fixed those, now I can just run node index, and you'll see here that we get to session closed. So we get to our final console log here. And then if we look over in the documents folder, we can see that there's now a movies.qvf file sitting here. And this is what will have our actual data. And the way that we can verify that the data is actually sitting inside of this app on our engine is by using Catwalk, which I showed you in the other video. So if you go to catwalk.qlik.dev and you do !engine_URL equals with our connection string, which is ws://localhost:19076. So if we connect to that, we can actually see that there is an app here called Movies. And if we go in, we can see that we actually have all of our information here. And it has our movie titles, all of our information, and it has our posters. And if we select one of the titles here, we could see that, you know, the URL for the poster exists. So this Catwalk is the great way to, when you're loading data into your engine, to verify that your app exists and that your data is loading the way that you want. So there we go. We now have data loaded into our engine. The next step is that we're actually going to bootstrap a React app, and we're going to connect to the engine on a JavaScript, not on a node.js side, but an actual front-end JavaScript side, and we'll be able to see that in the browser. So if you like what you saw in this video, don't forget to like the video, hit subscribe, because we're going to keep adding videos that not just to this series, but anything that's going to be able to help from a developer perspective. If you have any questions, feel free to join the Slack. Go to developer.qlik.com, and there's a link to the Slack down on the bottom. There's a whole community of Qlik experts that are ready and willing to help new Qlik people, which is fantastic. We have a ton of resources at developer.qlik.com. Check out the knowledge section for any knowledge that you might want. Check out the projects to see other things that people have done with Qlik. And we'll see you in the next video.